confirm that there is not a stain.
Leon Trotsky was born Lev Davidovich Bronstein on the 7th of November 1879 in the small village Yanovka in the Ukraine. Trotsky's family background and the events which he endured during his childhood were to have significant influences upon his political ideas. Brought up within a Jewish household, living an agrarian lifestyle in the Ukraine, Trotsky was sent to school in Odessa where he fell in love with the written word and demonstrated intellectual brilliance. The early influence of his radical uncle and years of schooling, alongside being caught up in the Jewish quota, continues to add to Trotsky's sense of injustice and his awakening of political ideas. It is in his university years where Trotsky encounters socialist ideas and is arrested for revolutionary activities influenced by the ideals of his future wife Alexandra Sokolovskaya. With the social issue of Nicholas Romanov's autocratic rule and the incompatibility of the Tsarist state with the demands of the modern state, the rise of socialist platforms becomes the forum for Trotsky to publicly express his political mind. Trotsky's emerging political role was initiated by his return to Russia in 1905. He became active in the 1905 Revolution and Bloody Sunday by convincing workers to use the time of revolution to overthrow capitalism and the Tsarist rule altogether. His role in the political movement earned him the promotion of chairman to the St. Petersburg Soviet. However, it would not last long, as his involvement got him arrested and exiled for a second time. During his time in exile, he develops his ideology of permanent revolution and expands his ideas all over Europe. His opposition to war was well known, contributing to an international anti-war movement, whilst the events in Russia draw Trotsky to the ideals of Lenin and revolution. In the September of 1917, Trotsky was elected as chairman of the Petrograd Soviet on the account that his oratory skills could sway crowds. At the time of the 1917 revolution, Russia was in a state of chaos. The Tsarist authority had since waned as a result of Nicholas Romanov abdicating in the March of 1917, and the rise of the provisional government, which still failed to cooperate with the Russian proletariat. Following the events of the 1917 revolution, Trotsky was promoted to the role of Commissar for Foreign Affairs. However, the events of the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk was the downfall of Trotsky's theory, with his stance of peace nor war alongside permanent revolution, creating a divide in support. This was a negative movement, as the success of the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk and an agreement with the Germans would allow Russia to leave the war and rebuild the resources which were depleted by this point. By using the peace conference to showcase Bolshevism, Russia lost a bargaining position and made a large concession to Germany, alongside Trotsky's prediction of a European revolution being proven wrong. Following Trotsky's failure in the position of the Commissar for Foreign Affairs, he was appointed in the role of Commissar for War. Tension was growing at this point, and as a result of the outbreak of the Civil War in 1917, Trotsky was willing to suspend his ideological prejudices to ensure the survival of the revolution. This was achieved with the use of ex-Tsarist officers, which caused further political tension. Trotsky's main role in the Civil War was the suppression of the Kronstadt uprising, which involved workers and sailors who were once loyal to Trotsky. Trotsky was able to wield his influence over the Red Army and order 50,000 Red Army troops to overwhelm the 14,000 sailors. This particular event was a clear indicator that the Bolsheviks had lost supporters. However, Trotsky was willing to subdue any protest. This was a factor which Stalin would later use against Trotsky for his own advantage. The death of Lenin in 1924 brings with it a massive tension. With Lenin's death, Trotsky automatically assumes that he will step into the same role which Lenin held. However, with the growing opposition of Joseph Stalin, the task turned out to be harder than previously predicted. In 1922, Stalin had already been elected as the General Secretary and had made friends with Zinoviev and Kamenev, creating the triumvirate. Stalin's ability to gather support was far superior to that of Trotsky's, especially considering that Trotsky refused to use the Red Army as a weapon to succeed. His massive underestimation of Stalin and failure to understand that the theory of permanent revolution was unpopular and not practical ultimately gave way for Stalin to easily assume power. Stalin's use of anti-Semitism attacked opposition and resulted in the isolation of Trotsky, expulsion from the Communist Party, and exile. Following the expulsion of Trotsky from the Communist Party in 1927, Trotsky moved around Europe and Asia in search of peace and the ability to continue to publish his revolutionary works and spreading the idea of communism. Although rejected asylum by many governments, his most poignant and last destination was Mexico, taken in by painters Frida Kahlo and Diego Rivera. His criticisms of Stalin continued to his last days and was able to once again become the prolific writer which he started as. Leon Trotsky's life ended in 1940 on the 21st of August. The man responsible, Raymond Masada, who had in the last few months gained the trust of Trotsky and acted as a member of his revolutionary group. Trotsky was struck by an ice pick to the head, which caused his death the following morning.